As this video is being made, a long time after several individuals have made substantial and legitimate critique of Anita Sarkeesian, her feminist frequency channel, and her Tropes vs. Women in Gaming series, many of these arguments have probably already been used by select individuals. However, I feel since Ms. Sarkeesian has not been bothered to sufficiently respond to any of it, I feel the need to reiterate some of this critique. There are criticisms of it Ms. Sarkeesian I feel are legitimate and compelling. There are others I feel are strong, but felt were not relevant to my focus and were not quite strong enough to include. It is hard for me to really express what exactly irritates me about this woman. Maybe it's her demeanor, so calm and collected, making everything outlandish she says seem perfectly normal. Maybe it's her jargon and how she constantly uses feminist buzzwords like patriarchy, misogyny, and victimize ad nauseum to manipulate her audience into being offended over the most petty rubbish. Maybe it's how she uses long words all the time to make her look smart, when anybody using their critical thinking skills can see how much of a pseudo-intellectual she really is. Or maybe it's because she's a tiny member of the bored collective known as the social justice movement. Either way, I am going to try to, in my own words, express what is wrong with many of the arguments used in her series Damsels in Distress, Tropes vs. Women. You just hear the title and you already know you're going to hate it, don't you? At least I do. It's clear Ms. Sarkeesian spends too much time on TV Tropes, an awful website where nerds, and I use that in quotations, ramble on and on about their favorite fandoms and all the tropes, more like cliches and plot devices, contained in them. She has egregiously used other tropes from the site to discuss sexism in the media in other videos called Tropes vs. Women. The names of these tropes are ridiculous. There is the mystical pregnancy, evil demon seductress, and women in refrigerators. I find it funny she uses terms like this along with actual academic language, as if TV Tropes, a website anyone can edit and is mostly composed of teens and young adults who don't have anything better to do, is somehow a legitimate source of cultural analysis. Another thing I dislike about this title is how she titles it Tropes vs. Women. This implies a false dichotomy in which you are either for women or you create and enjoy media which uses these tropes. To further prelude this video, I would like to point out that Ms. Sarkeesian did research after she made an uninformed conclusion about video games. In basic terms, during her Kickstarter campaign, Ms. Sarkeesian said, "Games are sexist. Now give me money so I can do research to prove why." This is a prime example of a poor scientific method. One may make a hypothesis prior to conducting an experiment or survey or doing research, but must remain open-minded and willing that her hypothesis may be proven false in need of revision later. Anyway, on to the statements actually made in Ms. Sarkeesian's video series. In Ms. Sarkeesian's first video in this series, she introduces the damsels in distress trope and gives a long, unnecessary, and lazy lesson in the history of this trope. I say this is lazy because the presentation takes up a sizable portion of her video, and she could have easily found the information on Wikipedia. And she hasn't even mentioned video games yet. I wouldn't normally have such high expectations of someone. However, since Sarkeesian is, or at least pretends to be, an intellectual with enough credibility to be interviewed by CNN, and has raised $150,000, I expect her to do better than what a 3.0 grade point average high school student could be expected to make the night before it's due. After this, she talks about the Mario and Zelda franchises. She talks about how Princess Peach is always being kidnapped by Bowser and rescued by Mario, then goes on to say, "I've heard it said, in the game of patriarchy, women are not the opposing team, they are the ball." This implies that, within the internal story of the Mario games, Mario does not rescue Peach because he actually genuinely cares about her, but because Peach is his possession, and this is a game to him. I'll admit I didn't grow up on Nintendo. My first gaming console was a PlayStation 2, and I don't really know about this series. I could accept that maybe this would be the case in a few video games. However, to use this as a template for how every damsel in distress is viewed by her rescuer not only trivializes male concern and bravery, but demonizes it. It's like saying a man whose female loved one has been kidnapped. Hey, those aren't actual emotions you're feeling, that's just the patriarchy. Sarkeesian also talks about what she calls the subject-object dichotomy. In her words, subjects act and objects are acted upon. Sarkeesian applies this to video games by labeling these protagonists as a subject and the damsel that which is acted upon. This cluster of intellectual jargon may seem correct to someone, but upon further examination it has several glaring flaws when it is applied to other situations. A YouTube user named Thunderfoot, an individual that, for the record, I agree with on occasion, rightly points out a situation where this idea seems very irrational. Applying this to the medical field, does the doctor become the subject and the patient that which is acted upon? If so, does this make the practice of medicine disempowering to those it aims to heal? When we apply this to the medical field and other similar occupations, that we realize that the fact that a person is acted upon in itself does not reduce that individual to a state of disempowerment. A professor acts upon her students by lecturing. Does this make the students disempowered? It is the way that a person is acted upon, not the act of being acted upon in itself, that determines whether somebody is disempowered. If I practice medicine while disregarding the comfortability and confidentiality of my patient, I am reducing that person to a means to an end. But if I act upon a patient by attending to his or her needs in a respectful manner, that is not only acceptable, but it is commendable. Similarly, when a character, male or female, lives his or her life on the line to save another character, he or she is not disempowering the person he wishes to save. Sarkeesian has not shown us character rescuing a female while disregarding her feelings. Thus her subject-object dichotomy is useless in proving anything. Moving on from Nintendo, Ms. Sarkeesian explores the trope in more modern games in Part 2. In this part, Sarkeesian talks about how women being killed or beat up in video games victimizes women. In context, women are beat up in video games either because they are brainwashed or on the opposing side. Women are also often killed in video games as an act of euthanasia. She says something about how the context doesn't matter, which shows how Ms. Sarkeesian has a very childish view of morality. According to developmental theorists such as Jean Piaget and Lawrence Kohlberg, there are different stages of moral development. In the initial stages, children see rules as things never to be broken. Later on, children see why these rules are put in place and learn that rules are guidelines, not absolutes. Consider, for example, a man who shoots another man holding a group of people hostage by gunpoint. Of course, the kidnapper in ideal circumstances must be tried according to our judiciary system before receiving a sentence, which would probably be life in prison. However, if people are going to die if he remains alive, the moral choice is to shoot him. Shooting this man would normally be wrong, but the context makes shooting him the right decision. Sarkeesian must assume that either women should never be killed under any circumstances, or that gamers do not have the moral development and are not smart enough to take in consideration the context. If the latter, Ms. Sarkeesian knows the context matters, and if she can figure it out, then gamers should also possess this capacity. If the former, then it is ironic, since she is the one who is pretending to be the moral guardian of us all. I should mention this video also contains one of the most idiotic statements I have ever heard. Sarkeesian talks about how women being euthanized is sexist. She says that if a male kills a female character to end her pain, that he is taking away that decision for her. Right after she says this, and this is an exact quote, she is asking for it, quite literally. You will notice two things about this statement. One is that it completely neglects what she previously established about how euthanasia reduces a man into a state of powerlessness. You will also notice that she is using charged vocabulary to imply just how offended you should be about this. She is asking for it, and is an argument frequently made by rape supporters and rape apologists when a woman either makes a poor decision to get drunk or the like, or to dress skimpily. This clearly has nothing to do with euthanasia. In the case of euthanasia, the person asking to die is clearly making a conscious decision. In the case of rape, by definition, the woman could not give clear verbal consent and is not making a conscious decision. Why would Anita even use such charged vocabulary in such an inappropriate context? Perhaps she thinks her argument isn't strong enough to stand on its own, so she needs to use buzzwords to make her mindless rodents agree with her. Finally, more misandry follows this section of the video. Sarkeesian talks about how she thinks male characters at first seem to feel sadness over their loved ones dying and guilt over not being able to save them. But when this is closely examined, it is really them feeling guilty over in her words, failure to perform a patriarchal duty. Again, Ms. Sarkeesian never fails to vilify a basic human emotion if it is one that is felt by a man. She provides no evidence for why she thinks that these characters aren't feeling genuine grief. She assumes that because they are male protagonists, they are merely a tool for society to reinforce their patriarchal ideas, and that anyone who identifies with their emotions is sexist. And now to my big issues with Part 3. I should mention how I hate how she talks about her previous videos by saying, "we discussed," as if there is any discussion going around Ms. Sarkeesian's videos, at least that she allows for. If you scroll down, you will see how she has disabled comments for all her videos. Furthermore, one of Sarkeesian's fans made a flowchart strawmanning all critique of her, and Sarkeesian herself liked this flowchart so much she reposted it. Does Ms. Sarkeesian want to silence dissenting views? I suppose Ms. Sarkeesian would say her reason for this would be so she can avoid all the nasty troll comments people have made on her videos. And yes, many of them were nasty and quite inappropriate. It is really sad that this happened because one would have to sift through all these comments to get one that presents any semblance of a rational response. However, she has done nothing to respond to any of the rational criticism of her either. There is no discussion going on. Ms. Sarkeesian only cares about the opinions of those who agree with her. So around 6 minutes in, Ms. Sarkeesian complains about how a female damsel character is interchangeable with a dog, while she previously stated that the female character is also interchangeable with a man. So does this make the man also interchangeable with the dog? It hits the fan in Part 3 when Ms. Sarkeesian shows how she fails to understand what she, in her own words, calls irony. A better word would be satire. If a game is using satire and portrays women as ridiculously helpless, that does not make it sexist, but rather quite the opposite. The audience can figure out that from the way events are portrayed, this game is not supposed to be taken seriously. In fact, a lot of satire is very mean-spirited towards that which it is parodying. A good example of satire, which I would urge Ms. Sarkeesian and her followers to see, would be videos by the YouTube user DarkMatter2525. This YouTuber makes anti-religious videos, which mock the Bible and the views of the religious right. He often does so by portraying scenes of the Bible in a ridiculously over-the-top manner. Now, would Anita Sarkeesian say that these videos are promoting Christianity? If she had any semblance of common sense, she would know that they are not. Similarly, the audience will not think women are helpless by watching these videos portraying satire, but will rather look at prior portrayals of women as helpless damsels meant to be taken seriously as silly or ridiculous. This is what satire is. Ms. Sarkeesian wishes to portray herself as an intellectual, but really a person with a basic high school level knowledge of the English literature will be able to figure this out. I do not understand why anyone takes her seriously at this point. Furthermore, she has no sense of humor. She must be a really awful person to be around. Overall, I think this series is very weak. Seeing as YouTube isn't going to let me go over 15 minutes, I'm going to have to end it here. Another minor complaint I have is that she could have mentioned a lot more female video game characters than she did, and part of the reason that she doesn't do this is because a lot of them are, in her words, sexualized, and I really honestly don't think this is a good complaint against the female characters. I mean, it doesn't really affect their character at all. It's just another reason for her to go against things that would disprove her point.